Wow, Chris, we are here, aren't we?
We are. How's about that?
How's about that, dude? We have the first episode of Why We Love Superman.
Yes.
Is
And
that exciting?
it's very exciting, especially because it seems like your love of Superman in particular has grown a lot recently.
It has. Well, I'm
So-
excited because, yeah. Well, it's always been there. It just hasn't always been very obvious. But today I'm really excited to talk about the show because we're going to be talking about Superman and a story that I kind of just took for granted. I'll be honest. And our good friend Javi has picked it out for our first episode of this new sub-series, which everyone knows I love sub-series. So without further ado, let's get this ball rolling. All right, let me get my computer so slow. There we go. All right, so today, hello Javi, you're joining us here.
Hey, fellas.
Hey.
I did not know that this was a historic occasion. I
Well,
just
yeah,
thought we were
so-
going to talk
so- yeah.
Superman. Little did I know, like, the pressure was on to pick the perfect story to launch this.
Well,
I
there
feel
was
like we
always
got lucky.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, we're lucky to have you. First of all,
Oh.
so but it being serious, and the second thing is, I think Chris, I told you I was thinking about doing some kind of like Superman sub series for a while, right? Like we gotta do that.
I mean, you sort of said that, but when you actually decided to do it, I was still surprised because I don't think you talked about it in a while. So you were
Well-
thinking about it more than you were talking about it, I think.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, and what happened is that I love sub series if people don't know, and obviously we've got a ton of them here, which I just love. I just for some reason think it's the funnest thing to do. For the DC people, we've got obviously the Infinite Crisis binge we've been doing, which we could kind of talk about at some point. Is kind of loosely ties into this a little bit, and then we have obviously the Gotham Knights, or Night in Gotham, podcast or show, we should say. That's on hiatus and anything. We just haven't really covered anything Batman in a while, which hopefully will be changing soon at some point. I'm assuming very soon. We've got obviously for Star Wars, Marvel and Star Wars. We have the Spider-Man Council. I just love sub-series. This is fun. This is fun to have things because. For me, I'm not sure for people out there, by the way, if you're watching this for the first time or if you pity us, hit like, subscribe, all that stuff, because it helps people, get into the shows. I really appreciate it. And everyone, new followers or new subscribers, thank you very much. But yeah, I just love new series so people can like myself when I find something like, oh, this great new channel, and I can go, all their episodes are all in order, and I really like when they do this kind of thing. I may not love everything they do, but I like their one thing they do about this or that, and I just can binge all of it, and I can have everything in these little subcategories for people to get into. So maybe I'm crazy and weird. I don't know. Does that make sense, Javi? Does that make any sense to anybody else? I don't know.
No, because, maybe Spider-Man's your jam, but Star Wars isn't.
Yeah,
So-
exactly. You get it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, yeah. So the Superman, and we have another Superman show. We're keeping on the DL, but hopefully get Michael Bailey soon on it. When we were talking about that, Javi, I think when we were talking about that with Michael in our DM chat. And then I was thinking about, I needed to get a show in, and I asked you, I'm like, hey, what do you want to do? You want to do anything? You pick. And you were kind of I want to talk about this and Superman. I'm like, why don't you pick something a little, why don't you pick something a little different? Like, what's underrated? And you brought up this, which I would argue is it underrated? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll discuss that in a second. But you picked Superman Secret Identity, and that is something that I have even bought back in the day, which I'll save for my little story about this here. And
Yeah.
that's how Javi does it. Yeah. He's like, give it to me. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit about our kind of history with this whole with the Superman Secret Identity. So Javi, I'll throw it to you first. Before you knew this was going to be the start of a new sub-series, what prompted you to pick Secret Identity? Because this is it's a heavy bag a little bit, to be in a good way. But yeah, tell me why do you pick Superman Secret Identity?
Well, I've always liked Stuart Immonen's art when he was on the Triangle series.
Mm.
For those who don't know, at one point in Superman's history, post Crisis on Infinite Earths, they started going to a Triangle series, and each book there were 4, then it grew to 5, like main titles. You had Action, Adventures of Superman, Superman, Man of Steel, and then they eventually added a 5th week book for when there were 5 Wednesdays, and that was Superman, Man of Tomorrow. And each book in the corner had a little triangle with a number and the year. So you could go at one point from issue 1 in 52. So if you wanted to follow the reading order, you could just, look at those triangle corner numbers. And the stories were like kind of self-contained, but sometimes they kind of tied in. But it was a cool way to get like your monthly fix. And towards the tail end of that, if I'm remembering my history, like Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immonen did. For a second, I got it confused. I thought it was under their Real World subset, but it's not. And it's not even really under an Elseworlds, although I think it's been branded that maybe during some of the publications. But it was just, without getting too much into what I love about it, it was just a simple premise of what if someone named Clark Kent got Superman's powers and they knew about a fictional character called Superman. And I just like the fact that it was, it was a 4-issue prestige series and kind of self-contained. You didn't have to know a lot about any other backstory. It was just these 4 issues. And just from when I remember reading it, 18 years ago, like it always just struck me as something that I deeply connected with and that I loved. But a week ago, I couldn't really tell you concisely what that was. And I've even rented it from the library from my son because they had a deluxe edition. And I'm like, read this. But then I never read it when I gave it to him. I don't even know if he got around to it in his stack of library books. But rereading it this week just reminded me how much I adore this book. And I don't know. I just feel so strong about it right now that it's like in my top 10 like Superman stories, even though it's not like a main Superman. Maybe even like cracking my top 10 of like all-time favorite comics. Yeah, but that's basically like this could work.
Interesting. I'll say again,
enough people read it, so.
Yes. So I have my story. I'll save that for last. I'm going to let the Supermen, I will say, because you guys are both my Clark Kents to me, very dear to my heart. But Chris Clow, why don't you go and let us know, because I don't really know your history with this book, to be honest, which is weird to say because I know your history with most everything Superman, it feels like, but this one I don't really know very well.
I just remember 2004 being a good Superman year in the comics because it was this and that was when Superman Birthright ended. So when I read this the first time, it was it was when it came out, and I haven't revisited it a lot since then, but that's because a lot of this story just really sticks out in my mind very well. The way that Stuart Immonen's artwork is, there's this kind of like photorealistic quality, particularly to his faces, that I really appreciate, that I don't think he really leans on as much anymore. Like you see flashes of it, but he does seem like he's moved a little more stylized in recent years. But there's just such heart to the way that this story is portrayed, and it's just a perfect in sync moment between writer and artist. Busiek, for my money, is one of the best Superman storytellers maybe ever. If you want to bring up his run on the ongoing title, which I think is severely underrated, when he started it after Infinite Crisis. The times you saw Superman and JLA Avengers, I think, really kind of define that story. There's just something about Busiek's understanding of what underpins the Superman character that I always find, I always appreciate. So when it comes to this, even if it's not like the actual Superman that we all know and love and have been reading for our entire lives, what I like about this Clark Kent is that he kind of evolves into having a more heroic countenance very naturally. Like he's given these abilities of strength, extrasensory perception, and where other writers, arguably lesser writers, would see that as an excuse to push someone into the depths of despotism
Right.
or someone into supervillain territory.
Yeah.
Busiek instead takes the approach that, with a greater understanding of the world and all of the people that live in it, it can push someone to greatness.
Yeah.
And so this Clark Kent, while he's not as, out and proud as the Superman that we know, he has it where it counts, and
Right.
it's a very humanistic story. And I think that's the thing that I appreciate the most about it. Not just that this is a guy who takes things as it comes to him and he tries to help where he can, but also the additional contemplative time that you spend with his, I guess you could call them flaws. He just seems like a good-natured person, and not to the level of like Paragon, but he just seems like he wants to do the right thing and he struggles with how to do the right thing. And as we go on this journey with him as he gets older and as he meets new people and takes on a more serious perspective about who he is and what his place is in the world, and you put him up against a very real sort of monolithic overriding force that is the black ops portions of the government, um,
Mhm.
it just brings out a very, very humanistic component that this is probably just like one of the single most human Superman stories that has ever been written. And I don't say that to take away from traditional Superman stories that I think do a great job of emphasizing his humanity, but this is a guy who's just kind of dropped into it. He doesn't
Yeah.
know what happened. He doesn't really know why it happened. And we don't really know how or why it happened, even by the time the story's done. But it doesn't really matter. It's just a
Yeah.
journey of this guy trying to get to a place that he can feel happy with, that his family can feel happy with, and he just does what he can to help.
Yeah. So, so if I remember hearing you correctly, Chris, so you discovered this when did you exactly remind me? I apologize. When
It
did you
was
discover
it was
this?
after the last issue was published that
Okay, so
I
it was
read it for the first time. So
okay.
I did not have to wait.
Can I ask you now, or should I wait? Where does it stand in your favorite? Is it in your top 10? Is it in like top 20? Is it
See,
like
it's hard for me to characterize it just because
it's not in continuity, so it's like almost a
it,
separate thing?
it's not so much that it's outside of continuity as much as that it's not Kal-El. Like that gives it a dividing line. I don't think that makes it any less of a Superman story. Far from
Right.
it. But, I can't help but just, I guess, draw a little bit of a line in that this is not that guy. But
Interesting.
if anything, this is a really powerful declarative statement on the power of Superman's
Right.
symbolism.
Okay.
And it's the way that Superman's symbolism can potentially impact the real world.
Right.
So it's on a different level. I don't know if I can necessarily put it like in my top 10 or top 20 Superman stories. Top 10 or top 20 comics? Yeah, sure. I think so.
Interesting. Well, I have a very interesting story, kind of a relationship with this because for those who may not know, I obviously I do love comic books, but I grew up on Marvel mainly, and my knowledge is primarily with Marvel. I just how it is, and I love it. I gravitate towards it. But DC's always been something I try to get into, and I didn't really start getting more deeper into the characters until I got older, until I'm in my early 20s, which is 20 years ago now, which is weird. Excuse me. So when I got really into Superman was ironically with Smallville. Zeddy, you talked about how this all reminds you a lot of Smallville. Well, I binged the first season on DVD, and then I loved it so much because I love superheroes and I loved comic books. So I'm like, oh, this is like right up my alley. And obviously Smallville was like niche thing. And for those who love, comic books and superheroes, or it was like our bread and butter for a while, and I liked the idea of a Clark learning his powers as he went. It was a really novel idea, right? For the most part. And I started consuming all these different Superman comic books. I bought all seasons. I bought Birthright, which Javi wanted to pick that. We'll pick that eventually when we get to a higher subscriber count for this very podcast. But I got Birthright all seasons. I started buying all the stuff, and I bought this because I'm like, oh, I need more Superman stuff. That's like get me excited. And I'm like, oh, it's like Smallville. I'm gonna buy this thing, by Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immonen. Whatever, right? It looks cool. It looks exactly like Smallville. Again, Zeddy, you talked about it. And which Zeddy, hit me up in the comments if you've read this. I'm not sure if you have or not. And if you are watching anyone, please hit the like button. I'm going to keep bugging you guys about that. And I got to tell you, I love Birthright. And we'll talk about Birthright eventually. But I read this and didn't love it initially because I didn't know what to expect. And I liked it, but it just didn't. I mean, I was in my early 20s, Javi. I was making it very, very clear. I was in my early 20s. So it wasn't like, I don't know if I was ready for this necessarily. But I've always liked the art. The art was amazing. And I'm a huge Kurt Busiek fan. I love Untold Tales of Spider-Man. I love Astro City, which we'll definitely do a sub-series for that one day when more people actually watch the channel, then I can actually expose people to it, because Astro City is phenomenal. And if I do it now, like one person will watch it, which is whatever. But I want more people. I want to expose more people to it, because it's incredible. Javi, have you read any Astro City?
A long time ago, like a trade. I don't really remember it.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get you on that, my friend. So anyway, I got this and I liked it and kind of forgot about it. And I'm like, oh yes, I forgot who drew it. And when I picked it up again, and it was Stuart Immonen, I said, oh, okay, yeah, I'm familiar with his work. He's a really good artist, obviously. I didn't realize he penciled, colored, and inked it. And I'm like, okay. So when you picked this out, Javi, I was really anticipating to go and devour this comic book. And it's I'll just kick it off here, everyone. I'm just gonna say I have one special thing I'm gonna save at the very end, and it's not even a hot take about this, but you'll see when I talk about it when we're closing. But I'm gonna tell this right now. I read this and you yelled at me, Javi, because I was watching football while I was reading it, because I just wanted to get started on it because my life gets busy and life gets crazy, right? So I started reading it, and I kind of literally right when I took the picture of me reading the book, I stopped reading because I got distracted, whatever, and I stopped. But I was just getting into it. I read it all pretty much Monday night, essentially. And I got to tell you, Sunday and Monday night, I got to tell you, this blew me away how good it was. Like I should not be blown away by how good Kurt Busiek is, because Kurt Busiek is probably the most underappreciated, underrated writer in comic books. Yes. And not by us necessarily. Like, I think like by us, the comic book fans.
He is shockingly absent from conversation.
Thank you. But when people outside of comic books who don't love comics as much as we do, but they like comic books, you know what I mean? And so like the scholars who are like, oh, I love high arts. I love the Watchmen and Frank Miller. And they rattle off all the Ghost World and that guy.
You know what it might be? It's that he's reliable,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think I ever really had, like, when I was selling comics, for instance, and when Busiek was on a title like Superman or something else, mm-hmm. I never saw people like jump up and down, but I didn't see people hold their nose either. It's like mm-hmm. he's solid, mm-hmm. at least with his monthly work. I mean, you and I know better that he can really hit those really high highs, but maybe people that were just like in the grind with things didn't recognize that there was just a general level of quality to his stuff that was reliable.
I wonder if Go, no, Javi, please.
I thought he always had like an esteem to his name, because when I heard of him, it was, Marvels, which I mean, I love Kingdom Come far more, but I also read it first.
Sure.
But, I mean, Marvels was like one of those books in the 90s. It's like, oh my God, have you read Marvels? And then that went to Astro City with the Alex Ross covers. Yeah. And then
really quick, Javi,
Tales of Spider-Man.
Yeah, I just want to interrupt only because I might agree with you about that, to be honest. A Marvel zombie, not gonna lie. Kingdom Come is my jam. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
Well, but I mean, like Marvel-oriented people, their Kingdom Come is probably Marvel's, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they tried Earth X, which I never read, and I don't really care to read, to be honest. Actually, no, I want to read it, but I want to read it in print. But I would say because Kingdom Come came after Marvel's, right? And so
Marvel's was 94, Kingdom Come was 96.
Yeah. And so I would say that I mean, obviously, Kingdom Come wasn't written by Kurt Busiek; it was by Mark Waid. So I mean, it's a little different. But
the Alex Ross,
Alex Ross connection. But I actually would say I love Marvels because it's definitely like a inside baseball idea of Javi. But I would say I've gone back and reread Kingdom Come more than I've read Marvels. But Marvels is an important piece of comic book literature. But anyway, I digress. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
Oh no, that was it. I just growing up, reading comics, like getting deep into comics in the 90s. Like
we're all like this.
To me was like one of those names like Alan Moore.
I think he was I think he was becoming that, but I think because of Wizard magazine was building that up.
That could have been it. Yeah.
Right. Which I think they definitely helped. The problem was the mainstream didn't pick up on that as much as we did. That's why I go back to the whole idea of like Kurt Busiek to us is a legend. But when you go outside of mainstream comic book people, just to like people who love comics, but aren't in it as much as we are, they aren't going to go. If they read Kurt Busiek, they're gonna go, "Oh, I liked Marvels," and they go, "What else has he done?" And they can pick up Thunderbolts Volume 1. And they go,
"Yeah, Thunderbolts." Yeah.
But here's the thing. That's what makes I think Kurt Busiek so good, is because he can do anything, and he makes it good. And he legitimately loves the medium and loves superheroes, and he does it in both a traditional and a more complex viewpoint, but he doesn't have to be one or the other, or he can kind of do both, or he can have fun like Thunderbolts, which Thunderbolts is a blast. But if you in Untold Tales of Spider-Man is a blast, but there are deeper themes within those things, but they're not as deep as, let's say, Secret Identity or maybe Astro City or Marvels. But he's, like you said, Chris, he's reliable, and but the thing is, I think it's when he does something like, it's not like a Neil Gaiman or an Alan Moore or Frank Miller, where it's like events where even like the people who just like comic books on peripheral, they won't like go, "Oh, what's Alan Moore done?" That's the problem. But I think it's because those people don't want to enjoy fun, dumb comic books, which I'm not saying he writes dumb comics, but it's just whatever. Go ahead, Chris. You're muted.
Of course I had to do that. One of the things too that makes me gravitate towards Busiek is that he is that guy who can operate, we know, at a very high level. And he's, like you said, Paul, he's a fan of superheroes. You have a lot of writers in comics that reach that upper echelon, and their work beyond superheroes is great. I mean, sometimes it's medium defining. Alan Moore is certainly an example of that.
Yep.
Neil Gaiman is certainly an example of that. But I always appreciate that there are long-term mainstream comics writers who aren't trying to necessarily get into superhero storytelling to try to deconstruct it without reconstructing it again.
Exactly.
And I think Busiek is one of those guys. Busiek is one of them. I think Grant Morrison certainly counts into that realm as well. Grant Morrison is an unabashed superhero fan and historian. And I mean, obviously two very, very different writers, but united by a love of storytelling. And Morrison famously said Superman is the human race's greatest ever idea, and I'm inclined to agree with that assessment. So I like that Busiek is a superhero fan, and he wants to tell stories that are comfortable with pushing boundaries, but that are still truthful to the cores of the characters as understood by someone who thinks about them at that level.
Well, and one of the things, and we'll kind of kick off a little more dissecting the story without revealing too much. As always, I want people to read these books because these comic books are fantastic. And I'm going to go on a limb and say I think that this is probably more underrated than I ever thought. Because rereading it again, kind of piggybacking off what you just said, Chris, Kurt Busiek is able to tap into the humanity of superheroes better than I think maybe anyone. And the deconstruction, the reconstruction, or even reimagining the heroes a different way. He just knows what makes these characters tick for the most part, because he's tapped into what makes him human and what makes him relatable. And I think nothing really screams that more than actually this comic book, to be honest. Excuse me. As we're reading this, and as I read it, now the best thing about art in general, whether it be, and I'm not art with a capital A. I say that a lot because this is art. This is not, is it commercialized art? Sure. But there is even this, to me, a higher point of art than even normal, mainstream comic books. The one thing I will say about this, that when I was reading it, was that, because for those who don't know, really quickly, this story is basically Superman in the real world. And if Superman were to come in the real world, this is what its story is about. And I thought it was interesting that as I was reading it, I was like, oh, like, because Clark, what's the whole thing about Clark, right? He's an alien. And, this Clark starts off as an isolated, person. He's very, or not isolated. He's very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Introverted.
Introverted. I couldn't think of isolated, introverted. He's introverted, and he's discovering, and his dad's like, go out there and mingle, and it's like he tries that. He's trying that, and he kind of learns about himself and the human race as Superman when he's Superboy, obviously, and that reporter, and he kind of learns like the ugliness of the human race immediately. And I like that, because it really shows he's learning, he's seeing what humanity is through, a truly someone's eyes that would try to exploit that. Right. And I like that idea that this comic book very much is about humanity, and that humanity can be bad, outside of, like, we're not talking about the supervillains and whatnot. We're talking about real humanity here, right? Like, these are all things that people would do. You could see throughout in power, who aren't in power, trying to get power. All that's throughout the whole book. And it's about Clark, finding out what humanity is, and, in my opinion, and accepting that, and also learning and growing from that. It's really powerful stuff, I thought. And I really liked, that's a theme there, but I'm not sure if it's how heavy it's prevalent with that, but I took it as, like, I loved him learning about humanity through being a superhero. If that makes any sense. I like that idea anyway, because he wasn't learning it as a regular boy. He was learning it as Superboy, or Superman, if you will. So I really like that idea that he really built off of that from this. So go ahead and talk about that, and we'll talk about the origins of the story a little bit, and then we'll move on from there. But anyone want to piggyback off of that?
Yeah. I think, like, for me, Superman wasn't a character I got into as, like, a little kid. That was like Batman, the Flash, Green Lantern, and Spider-Man. And Superman was there because we had the Chris Reeve movies and Super Friends cartoons and all that, but I never connected with him. And I told this on Nick Zednick's and Chris Evans' podcast, The World's Finest, part of their Vigilante 1939 podcast, a sub-series, Paul. And I was talking about my Superman story with them. And like, I kind of got into it with Lois and Clark, because that showed me, like, that Clark was the real person. Superman was the identity that he put on, which was different than what I had used to. And then found out in the comics that they were basically going from John Byrne on, and with that take, and that's when I started to latch on. And of course, right then too was when the whole Death and Return was happening, and so that was my in to Superman, was finding that humanity and that relatability, and that is basically what this story is in a nutshell. Like you said, he's the outsider, he's the introvert, he doesn't really interact with anyone, but by embracing these abilities and like going out in the world, like he finds himself. And what's so beautiful about this story is, it starts with him as a teenager and ends, in his twilight years. And in these 4 books, like we see this character arc, and how being more out in the world, how it, defines not just his career trajectory or his heroic trajectory, but his personal life and the relationships that come out of that. And I can get into it so easy because there's something so relatable about his journey and his humanity that isn't necessarily always present in every Superman story, and which is, understandable because he's 84 years old now, almost 85. So that's what really grabbed me into it, was the human aspect of it, and why I don't have a problem as seeing, even though he's not, the Clark Kent of Earth Prime or whatever, New Earth, whatever we're calling it this year. Like he's still Superman to me because he embodies those ideals. And just the whole wish fulfillment of this whole book is just astounding. Like if you've ever thought about having like superpowers of any kind, be it a magic ring or super speed or climbing on walls, or the sheer joy on his face in these pages you're showing of him flying for the first time. Like you can't not feel something looking at that art. And talking about Stuart Immonen for a second, like I've always liked like this organic style he has. But like this is so next level for him. It's like he's channeling his inner Alex Ross, but not being an Alex Ross copy. Like it's so good, and the emotions that he conveys through Clark, be it anger or fear, astonishment, joy, like it's just all right there.
Yeah, that's very well said. And by taking a look at this in terms of like its separation from the traditional Superman, like I said, that doesn't make it any less of a Superman story. It's just like the meta aspect of the fact that it is a Superman character who is himself inspired, influenced by the same guy that we know from reading comics. That to me is what makes this story bat a little bit more, or a little bit higher than I guess a lot of other more traditional Superman stories, because that's a story that so many of the fans know, right? There's some aspect of inspiration that I think a great majority of Superman fans feel when they read one of his stories, and by getting an opportunity, this Clark Kent is able to put that inspiration into practice in ways that we all wish we could, right? Which just feeds further into the wish fulfillment that you mentioned, Javi. And it I don't know, it just like it puts it on a different level, because this is a guy that to me feels, I feel a kinship with this guy that I don't necessarily feel to Kal-El, like
you relate to him more than Kal-El.
Well, I feel like I relate to Superman a lot, but that's because
you identify with him because he's more, because let's be real here for a second. Like, I'm not saying you can't relate to both at the same, but I think because I feel naturally, how about this? I think the reason why that you might identify with him more is because with the Superman comic books and the mainstream, it's a slower pace of things developing over time. And I mean by that, not like everything, right? Like him having a son at some point, took a while, that wasn't, this right here, you get to see kind of like where you were at as a kid, as a 40-year-old man right now, and as a daughter. I immediately identified with him, having kids. You brought up that panel on Twitter the other today, and how much you relate to him. That this is me. That is something you don't really see Clark do or say in the comic books that I've seen.
Not in the same way. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
exactly.
Not in the same way. I mean, a lot of it, I think, comes from the fact that the world this guy occupies is meant to be ours.
Exactly. Yeah.
And not that the DC universe can't feel real or punch you in the face, but you don't normally associate Metropolis with the ability to do that as much as a place like Gotham, for instance. But
right.
And different storytellers are more capable in different degrees to make the fictional world seem closer to our own. But there is a design language, at least, like in the first half of this story in particular, that is designed to evoke the world that we live in. And, I'm sure we'll talk about the inspiration to this in a little bit, which is interesting right now, especially for you and me.
Oh, yeah.
But I like the fact that this is a story really at the end of the day that is about the symbolic power of Superman, the character, and how, if given the chance, if someone had the ability to live up to that inspiration and to that standard, that ideal, you take it. That's the thing that I just find so enriching about reading this story. It's it's the story of one man's life, really, from the adolescence to conceivably the end of his life. And you don't get that same kind of encapsulation from a quote unquote traditional Superman story.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the scope that this aims for, and I adore the commentary that it provides to the everlasting symbolic power of Superman.
Yeah. Well, and that to me is, I think, where this story goes the right way. And what I mean by that is, there is the relatability, right? There is that set, because it's set in our real world. it feels grounded more than ever. And that is something weird to say in a Superman story, because also his power level doesn't seem as strong as, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't seem as prevalent in this story, in my opinion. And it's one of those things where I'm just kind of like, well, it just feels like this not could happen, but it just wouldn't surprise me. It's weird. There's something so like just close to home to me about everything about it. And I think the way it's drawn is because everything it's all like, not the pastels, but it's not bright. And I like the fact that it's not bright. It's because, again, I'll throw some pictures up here. It's very muted. And even when it gets bright, which I'll get to these pictures here in a second, it's still like a very not so. It's very tamed when it's bright, and I like that. And the fact that it's so consistent, because to me this is what the real world is. Like, this to me screams not like it's trying to be something that it's not. This is the real world. The real world is this nice bright place. Javi, I'll give you 1 second. But yeah, like, but still, it's just really muted level, and it feels real to me. This feels like a real world. Go ahead, Javi.
So dovetailing off that and your self-professed Marvel zombiness as a kid, do you think because this has some of that Marvel style of, because like Chris said, it's not Metropolis, it's actually New York, and they're real cities that he goes to and mentions, like even more than like the DC universe, like having more of that Marvel flavor added to Superman, did that make it resonate more with you this time when you read it?
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, we're so close after, I mean, obviously this came out 20 years ago, but
right.
I mean, very recently they did the same thing with Spider-Man, where they did Spider-Man life story where he aged in real time. And reading this again after having read that, like it feels very similar. But there was a lot of darkness to that Spider-Man story. As much as I loved it, like there's a lot of like tragic things that happen, horrible things that happen to Spider-Man. And this one, I don't know, I can't quite put it into words. It just, it's hope, you know, like you feel good after reading it, even though there are, you know, dramatic things that happen and real evil, like you said. Like, I feel good after reading it.
And so there's something, I think, there's something so relatable, and I think that someone who becomes like who's you know, not isolated again. I keep forgetting the word, man.
Introverted.
My wife's the biggest introvert. I can't think of the word introverted. Oh my God. But he's so introverted, but you see someone come out of their shell once they start learning. They do branch out, like his dad said, like, let's go out and go out there and put yourself out there. You'll be amazed at what you'll find out. And he does find bad and he finds good. And I think that
says that
exactly.
You know, that he goes out into the wilderness and that's where he feels himself. He doesn't know who that is yet, but that's where he feels it.
Well, and even his boss, to a lesser extent, like, go out and experience, man, like, get your heart broken, go, whatever. But you know, but I think it's telling him, like, you can't just stay hidden forever. And I think it's again parallels and metaphor for his life as Superman. And like, you can't stay hidden forever. You have to kind of expose yourself out and use those things for good. You know, before I get into the origins of the story, I know I have an hour. I don't want to we'll go crazy, you know, whatever. We can talk about this book forever. But before I talk about the crazy origins of this, I do want to focus on the art for a moment. And Stuart Immonen is, you know, he's a great artist. Obviously, he's a phenomenal artist, and I've read plenty of his comic books. I don't know him super well as far as like what he's done. I've read a number of different things. You're never late, Chris. You're always on time when you show up. I always appreciate you, homie. Mwah, love you. But the thing is that this book here, people, this stuff in this book, I'm going to throw some pages up here, is incredible. His storytelling is so precise and so good. And I want to pinpoint these things in particular, because so if those who aren't familiar with the story at all, this is actually 2 pages put together. But it's awesome because this also could be called Secret Identity / Establishing Shot, because it seems like every other page, Stuart is just putting out some giant, beautiful establishing shot of either, like, as we see here in this wasn't Kansas. I forgot what state this is, but
no, it's Kansas.
It's Kansas. Okay, so farm life, and then what's cool is this overlapping layout here. This one establishing shot is 2 pages, and then the panels below go left to right all the way through 2 pages. It is so beautifully done. I haven't seen many comics do this. Again, that I have read anyway, mainstream comics, and it's so, again, another great example. The City. Oh my God, so good. And the thing is, this is not just this one story or this one thing he does. He does 2 pages spreads multiple times, not just for splash pages, but to tell kind of a grander story, to give it a sense of size and a sense of impact.
And it also has a sense of photorealism too.
Thank you. Yes.
Without seeming like it's just directly copied from a picture. This is the kind of work that helps to emphasize that the world is a more inherently realistic one, which I appreciate.
Right. So this is just, again, this is not what I was exactly saying, but it's like this. This is 2 pages, and he just utilizes things so brilliantly, because you'll get things like this, and you'll get things like this, where it again, you're telling your sense of scale is there, and the storytelling is super impactful. And don't worry, Javi, we'll get to that one of those panels here in a moment before we're done, because you're right. And then, like, again, 3 panels here, just beautiful, and it's not, I love the gutters. The gutters is something that I think is so helpful, and it helps streamline storytelling for comic books. And it's not something you have to do, and I'm not saying everyone should do it, but it's so helpful. And this is just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous storytelling, man. I just think his storytelling is so precise in this, and it's so he uses everything so beautifully. And one of the things I thought was really cool was in the second issue specifically, guys, you have a story where after that, read the first issue. If you guys see this here, I mean, there's like just crap loads of dialogue and word balloons. And again, you're getting your money's worth. And the thing about, Kurt Busiek in this story specifically here in this comic book, that first issue is dense. There's lots of information, lots of headspace, narration. And then the second issue happens and things start getting a little more serious. And then you get like 6-7 pages of just this, no words, no sound effects, just pure, just going off of the page, doing all the storytelling without any words. And you don't feel cheated. You don't feel like you're not, it fits perfectly. And I think that sometimes writers and get into trouble thinking like, well, I'm doing it. Tom King gets criticized for this. And I think there is, I love Tom King too. And this is not a detriment to him, but people do criticize that a lot, but I feel you have to earn that. I'm not sure I don't know. It's up to you if the reader, if he earns it or not. Kurt Busiek can get away with it because he earns it, because he gives you so much words and so much dialogue that's not wasted. It's all used beautifully to earn when he goes into these moments of nothingness. And actually, honestly, after reading all those dialogue, guys, it makes these moments even more impactful because it's by itself. And I just think that Stuart using the panel gutters, and using that to his full advantage to tell a precise story is it's brilliant. And I wish more people would do more things like this, like having 2-page spreads of storytelling that goes over. It's not like the traditional, like here's 1 page, here's the second page. It's like over 2 pages. I love this. And this is not uncommon, but it's just not common to have done it as much as he did in this series specifically. So Stuart Immonen, again, I'm terrible pronouncing names. Everyone knows it. I apologize. Brilliant stuff. Anyone want to say anything before we move on from Stuart here?
No, I just outside of the fact that he's terrific, and he really does give this book such a sense of dimension, and he adds an incalculable amount to the human quality that the entire story has. So I don't think we can say enough good things about the work here. I mean, there's such a great sense of dimension to everything, and it really does make this a joy to flip every time you flip a page. I mean, it's a treat.
I really quick, Javi, before you jump in, if you want to jump in, I just want to add too that the last thing I remember Stuart doing was that I ever read anyway was Star Wars with Jason Aaron. And I liked his art a lot. He picked up after I believe it was John Cassaday. I really liked what Stuart did on Star Wars. It was very interesting. It looked cool, and it fit the world perfectly, I felt. But I didn't realize how good he was. I mean, again, he inked, he inked, he colored, he drew everything. And again, I just think this is maybe some of the most underrated artistry and storytelling layouts in modern comics, to be honest. It's really brilliant, really brilliant. Javi, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I went after we picked it, and that day I read it digitally, which on DC Universe Infinite. I don't know where you got the screen grabs from, but
DC Universe.
Some of the 2-page spreads had like an annoying line, like page crease in them. But I went looking for the deluxe edition.
Of course you did.
And didn't find it, but I did find Superman End of the Century, which is listed on the back of the Prestige issues. I never read it when it came out. So now I have like a hardcover of his art of a Superman story that I think he wrote as well. But now I'm going to get to enjoy that whenever I can find the time. But that previous spread you just showed.
Oh, which one?
The one I sent you earlier.
Oh, I'll put it back up here for you.
Yeah,
this 2-page. This is a 2-page spread.
Yeah, that. Oh my God! And I read this on the computer at work, which is a giant monitor, and it's so breathtaking. And I don't care what era of Superman you like on film and live action.
Yeah,
you can take any music from any of those properties, be it Superman and Lois or Man of Steel or Superman the movie, and put that music on and look at that image, and it works perfectly.
It's beautiful.
I mean, that is like the definition of chef's kiss right there.
For anyone out there who knows actually how to like do stuff, because I don't, video wise, if someone could get me a video clip and I can add to here where it's from Unbreakable, one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's Mr. Glass, and he goes, it's just him talking to the guy, goes, "This is art." Like that's I use it for memes and stuff when I'm like, because I just love the fact that he just like takes comic books so seriously.
Yeah,
which I do too, and he's a villain obviously, but like I just love the fact that he's like, "This is a piece of art," and honestly, like anyone who out there help me get that so I can clip it for this show going forward. And honestly, Javi, this is a piece of art. Like this is gorgeous. And
that's a poster worthy frame.
Yeah. And why isn't it? Like, it'd be cool if the artists could somehow through Marvel and get most of the proceeds to them or whatever, they could sell like that as art. Like, so we could pay for, through them directly and say,
no,
hey,
don't give them ideas, Paul. They're just going to sell them as NFTs. Don't.
But no, but put an NFT up on your wall though.
Yeah,
well, you can, but
we can be weird. Yeah. Anyway, but listen. But Javi, you made a good point. Like I sent Javi a poster of Fantastic Four issue number 1, which I have over here on my wall now. And like that, I would love to be like, hey, and get a high quality print of this said splash, right? Or one of my favorites, this is maybe become my favorite. This is my favorite. Is this embodies to me, like, just, I think this is gorgeous. But yeah, something like that where I could like get that and put it and frame it and actually be able to pay Stuart himself and give him the credit he deserves and the monetization he deserves without feeling like I'm cheating him, and doing it somehow officially. So it'd be nice to have something like that, right? So anyway, so
one quick other thing. I remember when during Dark Reign, after like the initial Dark Reign story in New Avengers, they announced Immonen was going to be the next artist, and I was super excited because of this book. And it looks very different. He did not do the inking or the coloring, which I think had a lot to do with it. Clearly that's a huge deciding factor in how great,
God damn it,
the artwork. He's actually right, but
I know he is right. That's why one time God damn,
it's no reason to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's have the attention to detail that he shows in his own inking and coloring is just phenomenal. So
yeah. So and for people who are wondering, like, I was reading the foreword for this, which Kurt Busiek writes a giant essay before this, which I didn't finish reading, which is sad. I just got busy, but the reason I didn't finish it was because I was reading, because I knew it was based off of Superboy Earth Prime. What I didn't realize was it was actually based off of the Infinite Crisis comic book issue tie-in that back in the day that was based off of this. And this is both the introduction to Superboy Earth Prime in Infinite Crisis, or his origin and how he kind of gets tied into everything. It's kind of bonkers. And this was Kurt Busiek's main inspiration was someone in Infinite Crisis. And he had this idea for a long time and didn't say anything. or he just kind of goes, no, they're not going to let me do anything with it. And it was just an interesting idea. This is not the literal character that he's writing from this comic book, but it's basically it's
a
inspired.
real world Superman.
Yeah, that's exactly. But this is what that was meant to be, though, right?
Yeah, Superboy Prime started out as, I mean, Earth Prime was supposed to be our world, basically.
Excuse me. What's funny, and going back to my earlier point about him being depowered, his powers are not the same as Clark's or as Superman's, and he brings it up here. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And you have the origin, and which I was like, this origin's bonkers. Which is really fun. Really quickly, I just want to say, which this story is I love this cover. It's a great cover, right? What's interesting is that this inspired, this basically, I just want to say it right now. This is essentially this, which is just hilarious to me, and how they're not the same, but they're very, very connected, which I would never anticipate. And as we're reading Infinite Crisis, which you can see and watch all the old videos if you're watching this for the first time, for this channel for the first time, and hit like and subscribe, please. And this, we're going through Infinite Crisis, which obviously this character is heavily involved in. And it's interesting that this, this Clark is not too far removed from that. Chris, you're muted. He's on the phone. Maybe. I don't know, Chris. I don't know. He must be. You're on the phone, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. So Javi, what's your take on? Have you read this comic? Were you familiar with this? It's DC Comics Presents 87, I think, is what it is.
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
So
I'm gonna have to check it out on Infinite.
Well, Infinite. I love when Lauer does it. And obviously Justin does it too. Justin Kowalski, I love you. I gotta tell you, I read this and it was just like, oh yeah, it's interesting. They didn't include it in this, which I'm kind of bummed about. Like in retrospect, is it anyone who's read this or has a newer copy? Javi, you might have a newer version. Is it included?
I only have the Prestige, the original issues. I haven't gotten it collected yet. I was searching for it, but I couldn't find it. So.
The deluxe edition is stupidly out of print, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it was not cheap, the one I found online.
Yeah, it's par for the course. Like, there's a lot of DC, you would think, prestige stories that
Batman Prey.
Should
put that.
Yeah.
Where the hell is that? Give me that freaking, and I want a reprint of that, damn it. I want to read that, and I want to have a nice trade of that. That's a freaking great Batman story. Thank you, Ryan Lauer.
Which is surprising, especially considering that I think, Javi, you would probably agree, Superman tends to get a little too short on the end of the stick from DC collected at times.
Yeah.
So
this should be reprinted ASAP. I have one major point I want to bring up, but again, if you guys are wondering what the origin and the genesis of this whole idea that Kurt Busiek got it from, it's DC Comics 87. DC Comics Presents 87. Superman and Superboy Earth Prime meet for the first time. We're kind of wrapping up. We'll have closing thoughts, and I have one closing thought, but I'll save it for last. I'll throw it to you, Javi. Any closing thoughts on this? And it sounds like it's pretty high up there for a story. Where does this rank for Superman stories? And what other closing thoughts for you?
God, I mean, we haven't even talked about like Lois.
Let them read it for themselves, my friend.
There's a Lois Lane.
There is a Lois,
and she's amazing.
She's a great character. A great character. And Javi, I just want to interrupt you really quick. And I also love the introductions of the original comics, by the way. Those are great. But I'm just gonna say this really quick. Hey, Chris, you're gonna laugh. Certain groups, if this were to come out now, they'd be like, "Force for diversity." It'd be that bull crap, right? Like, it'd be all about that. Which I remember reading it at the time. I remember even thinking like, "Oh, that's cool." Like, never thought anything of it. I read it this time, and after reading it, I'm like, oh, I bet if this came out now, they'd be like Comicsgate and all that, be like,
Well, if you're going to do a story about the real world, then you have to
Make sure
illustrate how the
everyone looks
real
the
world
same.
looks. So
anyway, Javi, I didn't mean to hijack. Please continue.
You brought up a good point with some of the homages too. Like this is amazing. Like,
oh yeah,
it is such a love letter to all these different eras of Superman's history in different mediums, but how it affects this one particular version, and his relationship with the government is interesting as well. And it's funny to read this in a post Man of Steel, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, not John Byrne's Man of Steel.
Put a pin in that, my friend. Put a pin in that. No one say anything else. Let's leave it at that. But go ahead.
You could say there are thematic similarities as well, but completely different ways of going about the material.
He definitely
there's a lot of stuff that is not resolved that Chris kind of mentioned, but it's not really important to the story that they're
telling. Yeah.
And it didn't bother me that those things didn't get answered. And he also did a story, Busiek did, in a similar vein with Jean-Paul Leon, which I have not read. I have it all, and I waited.
About the Azrael?
No, the artist.
Oh, I like
he passed away recently, and I think that might have been one of the reasons why it took him 2 years to make those 4 issues of Batman Creature of the Night. But it's supposed to be thematically similar to this, but I haven't read it yet because I was waiting for everything to come out, and then I never got to it. And now I'm kind of afraid to read it.
A Night in Gotham.
Because I don't want it to not measure up to what this story is.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that we went over this again, because I want to reread it again. And I mean, that's, they're 4 issues and they're over 40 pages each. And that just speaks to how much it really resonated with me. And like, it's the dream. It's, if you've ever read a comic and wanted to be that hero, like, you get to go on that journey with Clark here.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful. And I mean, I blew through this the day that we picked it. Like, I could not stop reading.
Me too.
And at the end of it, it's just like, I wanted to be a better person after reading it.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Like I wanted to have all those abilities, like the flying, especially. That's just always something I wish I could do for a number of reasons, but
not me.
It's such a magical story. If you haven't read it yet, Chris Evans,
come on, man. Get on it, dude.
Gotta get on it, man. It's on DC Universe Infinite. If you can't find a physical copy somewhere, which is pretty hard to do, it seems like.
Well, the issues seem pretty easy to find. But
are they
trades
collected?
Yeah, the collected forms, at least hardcover forms. I'm not sure about paperbacks, but I mean, DC Universe Infinite is probably going to be most people's go-to anyway.
Yeah,
very easy to find there.
It's such a love letter to the character and the medium, and yeah, it's the more we talk about it, the more it gets it higher and higher up in my rankings. And like, God, why did I not read this again for so long? Because I remember loving it. But
so is this maybe where in top 5 Superman stories? Is it in your top 5? And if it is, where is it in the top 5? Without, you don't have to rank it, I guess. Is it in your top 5?
It would definitely be in the top 5.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, before we give it to Chris, we have one thing you got to add, because you sent it to me as well, which I thought was hilarious. You nailed it. Please explain this panel, sir.
So Clark is walking with the girl that he likes to school, and he hasn't gotten his powers yet, but he's going on and on about how, like, his parents and family get him Superman stuff, and he doesn't like it, and everyone teases him for being Clark Kent. And these bullies come by and steal his backpack on the way to school. And the big jock guy, I'll give him this. He's like, what do you got? Luthor's secret plans. Okay, everyone knows Lex Luthor. If you know Superman, you know Lex Luthor. But then he adds this schematics for Metallo, and it's like Metallo is not an A-list Superman villain, I would think, to like the general audience.
Yeah,
exactly. The people who don't follow comics. Yeah, he's been in Smallville and Lois and Clark and the cartoon, but those were all post 94 and beyond. This specifically, this part of the issue takes place in 1990. So Metallo is nowhere in the pop culture radar unless you're reading freaking comic books. So I think this is the pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah, like, what you said it
he's
perfectly.
More of a nerd.
Yeah, he's like,
he's letting on.
Nerd as Clark is, if you know who Metallo is. I'm like,
yeah,
nailed it. Which also, I just really quick before you throw it to you, Chris. That is maybe one of the weaker parts of Stuart's storytelling, because how he gets the backpack is the pan. It's weird. Like he does. It's almost like he forgot to draw like a panel. Like it's like he's walking. It's like, well, because he's like, it's Clark's walking, and like it's like a close up of Clark's face, and the next panel is this. It's like he's like, hey, I'm like, wait, what just happened?
It's just
like,
sequential storytelling. It happened in between. Don't worry about
one more panel. He could have fit. He could have took away the They wanted to have more of a surprise. That's what they were going for, but.
The subtle digs I liked after Clark met Lois in this story, and he said that he was even set up with a Cat Grant. Like, is Cat Grant, is that someone from Superman? It's like, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I figured you guys would nerd out about that.
I enjoyed that. That was fun.
All right, Chris, John, Javi, before you have anything else you want to add?
If it's 1990 and you live in small town Kansas and you know who Metallo is, you're a nerd.
Amen to that, brother.
You should watch this show, and you're among friends.
And like and subscribe.
Hey, listen, thank you. And here's the thing, though. I don't like the one thing I push back on the nerd thing is because it's always this like negative connotation. It's like
right.
You know what I mean? But I'm also like, well, I just like stuff. Like this is not like nerd stuff, because it's like, because people like Superman's, like everyone likes Superman. Like it's not like it's it's only certain
Well, I mean,
it's like people who play Warhammer are more obscure.
Everybody has different kind of labels that they
mean Henry Cavill?
Yeah, Henry Cavill. Well, here's the thing too, man. Like I just don't like labels. I never like labels for the most part. But anyway, I digress.
You gotta take ownership, man. Yeah.
What's that?
Right. Especially on your concert t-shirts.
Yeah, here we go. We're gonna start the whole thing. Yeah, all right, Chris, what's your final thoughts on this story, my friend?
Oh, just read it. I mean, I don't think enough people have, frankly.
Amen.
I mean,
it's underrated, man. It's weird to say.
It's not as like very much like Busiek himself. It's not as a part of the ongoing conversation of Superman stories as it probably should be, even if it's not, for all intents and purposes, specifically a story about Kal-El of Krypton. It's a story about Clark Kent of Kansas, and how he aspires to the ideal of Superman when he realizes that he has the ability to make a difference. I think that there is more applicability to the real world than the concept might let on. If you're given the chance to affect something and change it for the better, take the chance. Even if it might seem annoying to do so, like it seemed it was the case with Clark, but this is really a story that that aims higher in terms of trying to connect our world with the mythology that so many of us gravitate toward and hold dear. And because of that, I don't think it would go amiss for, even if you're not a Superman fan. Honestly, you might get more out of it if you're not an engaged Superman fan, because it's kind of designed for people who aren't that necessarily into it, but this could certainly give you an in to a lot of other wonderful stories you can find, not just in Superman's realm, but in Kurt Busiek's realm.
Yeah. Well, and this is a great entry point, I think, for comic people who, if you're looking for someone to give, like, who likes superheroes but don't like want to get too heady yet or just too overwhelming.
Yeah.
I think Secret Identity is a great book to start because it gets you into Superman. It's so down to earth, no pun intended.
Well, and the art with the nature of the sequential storytelling is just
Amen.
very, very good. It's
Amen.
biting and very emotional. And
exactly.
yeah,
So,
I do feel pretty strongly that this could be someone's first, not just first Superman story, but maybe first comic book.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I think this would be a perfect thing to give a young teen, a 13-year-old kid. I think this would be a great book to give them because they could see themselves, but then see them age and see how someone like grow. You know what I'm saying? Like I like the idea of seeing themselves first, and then like I will get older. I will get old and have to be an adult. So, well said. Go ahead,
It's funny that you say that because I was talking to my daughter about this, and
oh yeah,
she's obviously grown up because I'm her dad around comics, and she used to read Spider-Gwen and Wonder Woman with me
That's
at
awesome,
night and everything, and she gravitated away from that and got into manga and was reading all sorts of different.
Hey, manga's still sequential art, baby. It's
like I don't care. Like I was happy she found like her own path and other things that she liked, but
right.
we were talking about this, and she just got like really into the idea. Like it really intrigued her. And she's like, "Can I borrow that?" And I was like, "Sure." So
amen, Adam.
I took them away right now just to have them as visual aids in case I needed to reference something for the show. But I mean, that's the idea of this story. Like it resonates, across the whole spectrum. Because I mean, she's a 16-year-old girl,
right.
like why people might not necessarily think that was Superman would appeal to her, but here we are. Like it's an intriguing concept.
No, yeah, I'm intrigued. If she reads it soon, go let us know. Let me know. I want to know what she thinks, man. Because and even like give her some more stuff like Kingdom Come or even like Dark Knight Returns or some of those bigger like Swamp Thing, even something like just give her say, hey, these are like known to be like the good stuff like everyone likes, and just curious what she would what she thinks because manga you're not the only one who's told me their young kid around 16 to 12 13 years old are gravitating towards manga, and I think part of it's because there isn't it's just really it's easily more accessible to as far as to get the comic.
And she's got like the little cheap like $10 romance trades.
Exactly.
And then she's got like all of Battle Angel Alita in hardcover on her bookshelf. Like she goes the whole spectrum. It's awesome.
That's awesome.
Right. And that is and really I don't want to get too crazy because this is going to be an eventual episode too. That is a problem with modern American comics is that there's not a cheap option. And if it is a cheap option, it's one that not everyone can afford, like an iPad, because that's the problem right now. If you want, and I know Marvel and DC are trying to get out there, but really they need to get out there and figure out what is a cheap way to make as far as to put out the comic book, and you have to pay the artist, et cetera, et cetera. But let's find a way to make a cheap product as far as like as cheap as we can, as far as the actual physical product, and get it out there for kids to destroy. Dude, my daughter,
kids like crazy use iPads now. That cheap method of distribution.
Everyone can afford iPads, homie.
Well, like, I'm not talking specifically about iPads, but tablets.
Well, I agree. No, I agree. We talked about this. I talked about like, what if Marvel and DC put out their own, and Disney doesn't give a crap about comics, but what if Disney put out their own iPad where it'd be like a designed cheap that you can read and watch things on, and that's it. But you can at least go, hey, go read all these comic books on there, whatever. But
but chances are that a parent probably has some sort of device with internet
phones
connectivity.
Don't do it though.
I mean, in the same way, but if you're talking about just like evangelizing,
this is a great. No, I get it. Listen, this is a giant conversation, which I want to have.
Yeah, but you started it.
I know. I'm gonna end it. Damn it. Anyway, I love this. Again, you know me. I love tangents. I'm gonna say this.
There's a whole other podcast.
We have like 800 whole other podcasts. So I'm gonna end on this, and I'm just gonna quickly say, I love the story. It may be in my top 5 Superman stories of all time, and I've read a decent amount, not a lot, but I've read a decent amount. I didn't love it as much before. After reading it now, I think it's amazing. It's beautiful, and I'll never underestimate this thing again. And I can't wait to actually read it again at one point soon. And Kurt Busiek is incredible and should be praised more. The one thing I'm going to say right now is that I think there is a huge potential of a Elseworlds Joker like movie with this. And you brought up Man of Steel. I thought it was interesting because I thought that the color palette, the muted colors, heavy in this. And it does make me think that maybe Zack does that already, right? Zack Snyder. But I wonder if this was potentially something he goes, oh yeah, like this will work because this is a great example. I think Man of Steel feels very much in kind of ish world a little bit. Now, I say all that to say that I think this story specifically could be adapted very easily and extremely cheaply. And I say that not in a detriment, but in a way like they can make a movie of this because they made a Joker movie that's kind of away from everything. And DC's finally figured out, oh, we don't have to worry about people being confused. They get there's different versions of characters. And right? I think this to me would be a really cheaply made movie you could put out in the theater. It could make, you can never predict this, but I think this could easily make 500 million. And because if you cast the right actors and actresses and get the right visionary director, you have, and again, this is not Man of Steel Redux. This is a very much more realistic, down to earth. You could sell it like that. And I think there's a lot of artistic merit. There are people who don't really love this stuff to begin with could say, oh, I like that. Because it's not about blowing up things. It's about humanity. It's about, using your powers and all that. It's a lot more relatable and more interesting from an introspective mindset than it is from just a classic blow 'em up 3-act structure. And I think that this would be huge and could do really well in that market like Joker has. And I think that if you cast the right actors, use the right people, and use the right director, this could make a lot of money and make a lot of money in retrospect to the budget, because this budget you could make this 100 million easy. Because there's, a couple green screen shots, it feels like
volume.
This is this could be pretty money in my opinion, but I don't know. But I don't think you do it right now. Maybe in like 8 years, 10 years, 5 years, you could probably do the story. And I think people will be ready for it and would be all about it. And you don't have to break the bank and make a pretty interesting artistic Superman story without being like negating it and be as like mega artsy, but actually have like a really interesting story.
They have to start believing a little more in Superman first.
I don't want to get into that. I agree with you. I'm just saying that this story, if you want to be, this could get
people. It would work. Look, I agree with you. I think it would be an interesting experiment to tell a different kind, but also more potentially traditional alternative superhero story. That's focused on a hero. How about that? That sounds like a refreshing change of pace.
Well,
no, it would be cool if it ever happened.
And the last thing I'm going to add is Adam and Javi took the words right out of my mouth. I think Life Story is a solid story for Spider-Man. I think this blows it out of the water, obviously, but I wish, like you said, Adam, I wish this was what Life Story was, because this is Mark Bagley did a great job. I think Zdarsky went too far in places that I think, and Zdarsky's a good writer, but I think this is predominantly better than Life Story. But anyway, we'll wrap up here. Javi, thank you so much for picking this one and coming on the show and staying. Your daughter's birthday was today and you came right afterwards. I feel like a jerk about that.
Oh, but she gave me permission. I asked her, and we kind of spent, because I was working today and she had school and rehearsal, and we kind of picked Sunday as like a big celebration day, and we went out roller skating with her friends and did stuff. So today was more the low-key chill night, and she was going to bed right when we started recording. So
perfect. Okay, well, tell her happy birthday from us.
I will.
And and this goes for Jack and your daughter Evelyn, right? Which is my cousin's name, by the way. Nice. Tell them they're both invited on the binge, and I love and not only they're invited, I want them to come on because, one, I want to get Jack's perspective of Spider-Man. I know on the podcast, but other comic books too. I want that younger perspective. But with your daughter reading manga, I'd love to get her on and get her perspective of manga and different things like that, because I have manga I want to bring up here. So offer the invitation to her and Jack, obviously. So but anyway, where can people find your amazing content, my friend, and on social medias?
Twitter, for as long as that's around, is on the screen there at Javi True. On Instagram, I am the Bond is not enough, because I love James Bond, but I love more than Bond. I love Batman, Spider-Man, The Flash, Superman, obviously. So I am in those places. At thejamesbonddossier.com, I've been reviewing the comics there for the last few years that Dynamite's been doing. And at Batman on Film is primarily my main home for writing right now. Reviewing, what am I doing? Catwoman, Gotham City Year One by Tom King, which has been really awesome.
Oh, I need to read that. Batman
versus Robin 3 came out this week by Mark Waid, and that was a tearjerker for me.
Really?
So, with the Bat Boys, Batman animation, recording with our friend Lauer this week. We're going to talk some BTAS. But Batman Animation's a new show we launched about 2 months ago, and we just talk about Batman and animation. One of us picks an episode, we get other people to join us, and nothing is really off limits. We've done Super Friends, we've done The Batman, Batman Beyond, Beware the Batman, Brave and the Bold. I mean, we're doing everything. So that show can go on for years.
It can go on forever. Yeah. Right on, man.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And I had a lot of fun tonight.
Javi, as always, you are invited pretty much on every show whenever you want. You just let me know. I'll send you the link. You know that, brother. You know it. And you may have to be a regular on not this show as well, as far as like a host, not just a you are a fixture, on
Thank
this.
You, man.
On this.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I super appreciate everything you do. And by the way, we got to hook up about that Bagman toy you got me. So I will.
Yes, I'm trying to find something else to add to the package. So that's where the holdup is.
Hey, listen, we'll talk. Anyway, but thank you, brother. Yeah. Thank you. Awesome. Chris, where can people find you at, my friend?
At Chris Clow on Twitter, CHRISCLOW. Still on Twitter. We'll see. Keeping it, I guess I'm a rat. I go down with the sinking ship.
I don't think it's gonna go down, but I think it's gonna get close.
We'll see. We'll see. We could be surprised, but at Chris Clow on Twitter, and we're gonna be doing. We'll probably be doing something related to Wakanda Forever on this channel. I would imagine at some point.
Probably next month. Yeah.
I was on a recent episode of the Batman on Film podcast where we talked about Gotham Knights.
Good episode.
Thank you very much. Yeah, me and Mr. Ryan Haas and Micah Ramey talked about that game. I'm still playing through it. I am planning on reviewing it through one of my own channels. Maybe even stacking it up against another comic book video game that came out within the last couple of years. Might be fun. So we'll see.
Well, you can follow.
Still waiting to play with both of these gentlemen in Gotham.
Hey, listen, I haven't got the game yet, man. I'm broke, so that's how it is right now. But anyway, thank you everyone. Hit like, subscribe. Really appreciate everyone who does that. We're slowly building up to 1,000 subscribers. Big deal. Hopefully when we hit 1,000, we'll probably eventually do a Patreon, and we'll eventually do that stuff to help support things. But it's just not ready yet because we're not there. But hopefully we will at one point. So please spread the word of the Comic Binge. We are here for people to get into comic books and have people to hang out and get different opinions, but to welcome people to reading comic books, all kinds of comics, whether it be mainstream superhero stuff, super artsy-fartsy stuff that you can get at Fantagraphics that my wife loves, which we'll be doing a mega artsy book by Alan Moore here real soon. It's From Hell with my wife and her podcasting partner from our Dark Hour, or whatever it's called, or a One Dark Hour. I forgot what it's called. I'm really bad. Sorry, Morgan. I love you. But anyway, we're gonna have that show here in a couple weeks. Next week's Infinite Crisis, our next installment of that, which I can't wait to get the Vigilante, the Knights of Me. Pop, Mr. Baby, and Papa Nick. So we'll get them on here soon, and we'll hang out, have a good time. Follow us on Twitter, Binge Comic, and Instagram, all that stuff. And Chris, why don't you take us out, my friend?
Yeah, some more emotional Superman stuff coming your way very soon.
Yes.
But in the meantime, read more comics.